On this Garden Time show, buckle up. We take you abroad as we talk about our recent trip to Holland and Belgium. We toured private and public gardens as we learned about growing great plants in Northern Europe. All this and more coming up on Garden Time. Garden Time is brought to you by Capital Subaru in Salem, Oregon.
Start your new Subaru story at Capital Subaru. We are like nothing else in Oregon. From the moment you step through these doors, you see it, you feel it. We do things differently here. Our people, our culture, our customer experience. Tell us what you're looking for and we'll upgrade the way you shop for Subarus. When you're just browsing, need great service, or starting your next adventure, we're always here for you. It's your story at Capital Subaru, your way on the Parkway.
Welcome to the Garden Time Podcast. We're based in the Pacific Northwest of the United States in a Zone 7 region. This deals with plants that can survive at approximately 0 degrees Fahrenheit or warmer. I'm producer Jeff Gustin with your hosts Judy Alaruzo and Ryan Seeley. And welcome to Garden Time, the podcast, and thanks again to Capital Subaru in Salem for sponsoring us. We just got back from our wonderful tour, our garden tour. We took a bunch of Garden Time fans that wanted to hang out with us. We don't know why. And we went
in a different country.
Yeah, and we went to Holland and Belgium. And so today we're going to talk about some of the things that we saw. And it was an impressive trip, and we were just talking about how much of a blur it is.
Yeah, so
it
quickly.
It's a lot of information coming to you at once, and there's a lot to see, and you try to remember it all. Fortunately, I think I took a couple thousand pictures.
Yes.
And it's nice because it kind of date stamps it and tells me where it was.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
That I was. So that's kind of great to put that all together.
Well, and I posted a bunch, so anybody that wants to see our
nice.
tour can go to the Garden Time Facebook page. And if you scroll down day by day, I posted about 30 to 50 pictures, depending on the day, talking about where we went and tagging those. Because our travelers, when they're traveling, they're busy, and so they don't always get a chance to post and send pictures. So I did this, and I tell them, just tell your families to look at the pictures, and then you can share the rest of them when you get home. So
and that's the best part, because your family and friends can know what you've been doing every day, and you don't have to keep texting them because you're too busy.
Yeah, and it was fun to actually to see Jeff's pictures while we're doing it. It's like, I'd get back to the hotel at night, and I'd do my Facebook post and those things.
Yeah, it was great.
I'd see Jeff pictures, and I'd go, I didn't see that. And I was like right there with him. Or, oh, his picture is better than my picture. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's where we were. So it's fun. It is fun to see everybody.
And I'm just going to steal both of yours.
Okay, great. So first of all, we landed, and the very first day we went to the flower auction. Now, this is a huge flower auction. They fly plants, cut flowers in, some plants, but mostly cut flowers, little pumpkins, whatever is seasonal, and then they auction them, and then they fly them away. And so
it's unbelievable to see. There is 20 million cut flowers that roll through that facility every day.
It is amazing. 10 soccer fields, right?
It's 5 to 10 football fields. Sorry, depending on what.
But you can't. Even the pictures don't do it justice because it just goes on forever and ever. And we're trying to identify, and we're like above it looking down, and we're trying to identify.
You walk around, it's kind of a self-guided tour.
Right.
And so you're up in the catwalks above this massive warehouse facility, looking down on these thousands and thousands of these rolling carts that are filled with flowers. And there's an amazing amount of like little trolleys and people that are, it's all like automated. It's like, like little ants following each other. How they don't run into each other, I don't know.
And half of it's automated too, because the carts are in tracks on the floor.
By themselves,
So that's a lot of.
It was just incredible.
Yeah. Right, because it starts out, very early in the morning, where all the, the buyers show up in this little room, and these little trolleys roll by. And it's this quick bidding process, which is just fascinating because the price starts out, and then you're trying to balance. Okay, how much do I want to pay? Where it's not what somebody else is going to pay, but it's just this constant going. You got to be quick, because with that many thousands and millions of flowers flowing through there every morning, it's got to go fast.
Yeah,
I found it fascinating because they start at the highest price. They pick a high price, and then the price lowers. So if you buzz in too quickly, you're spending more than you would.
Right.
But if you wait, somebody else may get that shipment of flowers.
Right.
So yeah, I found it fascinating because it's totally opposite of what we would consider normal here.
Right.
And bidding wise,
Right.
it's starting with
Right.
the lowest price
Right.
and try to bid up. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was fascinating, and it was huge, like you said. But we also had some fun because they are open for tours. They have a gift shop. But they also did the little interactive things. We did
The video is crazy.
yeah, we did a green screen thing where we're all posing and we're popping up in
Right,
flowers.
right.
And then we did a little video. It's airing right now where they have a cart against a green screen. And at a certain point in the video, it kind of talks about how the flowers get there. And then we're all in this cart and it's acting crazy. So that was kind of fun. We went from there to a historical garden, and this was Alsmeer. So Alsmeer has this huge flower auction. But they also took us to a historical garden to kind of demonstrate, first of all, how they started reclaiming some of the land, which was fascinating.
Well, yeah, because God created the world and the Dutch created Holland because it's so much below sea level that they made all these dikes, and the engineers are just amazing. Over 100 years, 150 years ago,
Right.
they started this.
Yeah, over 50% of the country is below sea level.
It's just incredible.
And so they realized that they need land,
Right.
And so they've hundreds of years have devised the system of getting water from the lowlands and pumping it out and reclaiming this land, and then they're using it. And the peat, they're harvesting the peat moss and using that, but at the same time you're digging down as you're getting the water in. It's just
Putting
it's very,
sand and
it's a very intricate system of that
Right.
they've figured out
Very much.
masterfully.
yes,
And,
incredible.
and they were talking about, the windmills are very cute, but there were thousands and thousands upon them that were pumping. The wind was pumping that water out and allowing them to actually use that farmland. And then other windmills were like for grain,
Right.
grinding
And
grains
mills,
and that kind of stuff. But I don't think people realize now. In fact, we went to Kinderdijk, which is a UNESCO heritage site, and it has all these windmills there. And it was fascinating because we got to go inside and we got to see some of that. That was later on.
No,
the
that
tour.
was cool.
Yeah, don't jump ahead.
I
too
know,
quick.
that's all right. Sorry. But the interesting part was how much they could grow.
Right.
And when we were at the historic gardens, they were talking about lilacs and how they moved them.
Yeah,
Right.
that was really bizarre.
Right,
I don't know.
being an area where they're doing all of these cut flowers, and it's very integral to their economy. They're growing these large lilacs, but they realized that if we move them inside and put them under a greenhouse, we could force them along a little bit, take the cuttings, but then they also realized that now we need the greenhouse for something else. So they move all of the lilacs out and have these areas amongst the peat bogs and these canals. It's like this grid system that they move the lilacs out. But lilacs don't do well staying in a pot forever. So they plant them all, let them grow for 2 years, dig them all up, put them on little barges on the canals, barge them over to the greenhouse, unload them all, plant them in the greenhouses,
There has
force
to be
them
an
all,
easier
harvest
way.
them, dig them all up again, put them back on the barges and move them back out there.
And these are big plants. I mean, they're huge. The trunks are probably 10, 12
Right, they're like
inches.
50-year-old lilacs.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
But people, they think of tulips.
Right.
You think of Holland, you think of tulips, you think
Right.
of spring.
Right.
But they lead the world in cut flower production in some certain species.
Sure,
and it was
sure.
that was just, and we had done a barge trip where we went out there to see some of those
Yeah,
places.
those were cool.
But that was fascinating. Then, we walked around and we went to the Rosen Radish. And this is just a quick one. This was an organic farm. And interesting to go from a large flower auction and hear about how they do mass-produce flowers. And then we went to this small farm where he had a tropical garden in there, but he was able to tell us a little bit about the organic.
Yeah, and he's
growing.
really, I think, doing cutting edge kind of way out there kind of pest control, and he's using all kinds of other things to kind of be organic as possible.
I mean, he plays music and has done a lot of studies on certain types of music, deter certain pests, and create overall health
Right.
of these plants, which is pretty fascinating
Yeah.
to listen to, but trying to wrap your head around that. But he's got speakers that are playing
yeah.
music, and he's proven that, if we play this type of music, the bugs go.
Right.
It has to be a certain beat. a
Right,
certain
right,
rhythm,
right.
And certain times of year,
Yeah.
and
Sure.
right.
And doing it on a wide scale. I mean, you just don't see that. I mean, people do it at their houses, but to do it on a commercial level is pretty amazing. That he's really adamant and really passionate
Right,
about it.
and he's one of those farmers that's had to adapt over the years. It's a generational farm that started out as, cut flower, rose cut flower production, and as the world grows and economies of scale and the mass spread, found himself that in this market that kind of is shrinking. So he's adapting his family business and practices into other things and studying more of this, which is pretty fascinating.
No, it was very cool.
Well, and there's day one. Okay, so it's really
do a lot on these
it was incredible first day. I mean, you get there and you have a couple hours to kind of acclimate and get to bed, and then we're full board on these tours.
Right.
So the next day we stopped at the private garden of Emily Hacker. And we had tea and stroop waffles and dodging rain showers. And we saw she had a beautiful garden, which she did by herself.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And Ryan, you said you walked over and there's a dike behind her house.
There is, yeah.
Yeah,
So as I
yeah.
was out exploring, and so she goes, back behind her house is a dike, and you look up, and her house is not sitting above the
No,
dike.
it was low.
It is below.
Yeah.
So you walk up the hill to get to the canal.
Yeah.
So she's
She's
under
below sea level.
Knock on wood.
They
it holds.
all rely on the dikes, and it's just very interesting. And everywhere we would drive, you would look up and see the canals above you, and the roads are below, and
Right.
it's kind of
Yeah.
trippy. Just
Very much.
Right.
Oh, very much. But I love this garden because, we all talk about rooms in the garden, and I think she really have that as her basis for her garden.
Yes.
Because there's all different kinds. She had like a formal kind of garden with hedgerows around it, and then she had like the wild garden. She had a water garden.
Yeah, like a white
garden.
evening garden.
And she had statues, but it was like all different kind of styles.
Yeah,
so it was
and
fun.
it was fun. It was very comfortable. I mean, because on these tours we see a lot of public gardens, we see a lot of formal gardens,
Right.
and to see something like this, where her husband essentially just goes around and picks up piles of stuff. He's like,
Right.
that's his thing. She goes and she makes sure what's planted, what needs to be pruned. Very, very unique in the plant material because it changed throughout the garden.
Right. So, one thing, speaking of her pruning, she did this most amazing fence row all around her property using her prunings. So all of her limbs and her branches, she would kind of layer and weave together and created this, 4-foot tall perimeter barrier around her property of all of her leaves and cuttings and branches. It's actually kind of bird's nest.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Kind of like it was a very interesting approach. to
Yeah,
that. It's
but
like,
it's
why
great.
not?
It kind of did her perimeter, but then it was great for her habitat for animals or insects or whatever. So
Right.
it was just very unique to see. I'm glad she pointed it out to us because I thought at one part it was just like her brush pile, but then you saw this huge wall that was going all the way
Yeah,
around.
it went around for a long time.
Yeah.
The next day, travel day, we stopped and of course tasted. We went to Antwerp on our way to Ghent, and we stopped and we tasted chocolates and saw museums, and I think we saw artist Rubens, Peter Paul Rubens' house in Antwerp, and his studios, and that was fascinating because he had a garden there, and they were going back to his paintings and some of the drawings of other artists from that era to see what was in that garden, and it's in the middle of a major improvement.
Yeah, it's going to be really nice.
Yeah.
In a couple years. Luckily, we're the last before they're closing it down, but they're really doing so much research to try to get it back to that period and try to make it like his home was when he
Right.
lived there.
Yeah.
So.
And they were saying the reason why it stayed there is because he was pretty rich, and and he had a school there. So even after he passed, that went on. And when we got to Ghent, we stayed at a pretty fantastic hotel.
The
Cool
hotel in Ghent was called 1898 The Post.
Yeah.
And it was an old post office that
was
had
really
converted into this hotel. And it was like, you'd walk inside and you'd find all of these little tiny rooms and spiral staircase that would lead to some other little hidden, like the honor bar, little
was
sitting
cool,
area
little
where you could just
space,
sit and have a little drink and on the honor system. And
Right.
Write your room number, and
Right.
but they had an entrance there, and so we didn't come in through the entrance. We came through the back to go to check in,
Yeah.
but by the front door was almost like a half a block of gardens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And which was fascinating because that requires a lot of work and it's not really necessarily seen by everybody.
Mm-hmm.
No,
So-
and it's right smack in town. So
Right.
you have, out the backside is the big plazas,
Right.
where everybody's out there at night mulling around. On the other side, on the front, is the big canals with the big boardwalks where, and the restaurants, so everybody's milling around there too. So you're just have
Yeah,
all of this
it was
excitement, and then like Jeff said, was right there was this beautiful little courtyard kind of setting with
Yeah.
Well, the
a
hooker-
pretty amazing hookah wall.
Yeah, that it was a solid. Did we ever figure out what it was?
I don't
I took some pictures of it and we'll post them on the
Send it to
over the
Dan.
top,
Yeah.
but, and it's on our page as well.
Yeah.
But it is. It's
Living
they
wall,
used
yeah.
like those fabric pockets
Yeah,
that were
it
there,
was cool.
and but they were getting towards the end and they were starting to change into their fall colors. So
Yeah.
makes you wonder what they put in next.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
and then from there we went to the botanical gardens again, and this is one of the oldest gardens in Europe, and so probably in the world. I think they're the first ones to bring tea or coffee plants or something into, and they were growing them in greenhouses and that kind of stuff. And,
Yeah.
and obviously they had wealthy patrons hundreds of years ago that thought about this. So what were you thinking about when?
So it was pretty fascinating to talk with, and I was there. I got to do an interview with Joost, and Joost is he's a volunteer at the gardens, been doing it for many years, and we did a really nice talk, just kind of what is botanical gardens, what are their importance, why are they there, and so it was interesting to kind of get their when you're talking to a botanic garden that is this old, that's been around this long, what is the interest? Why do we go there? Why do we
Right.
have these things? So I think we touched
Yeah.
on that a little
Yeah.
bit.
Before we
in
get
the
into the interview, we're 10,000 different plant species. University, so they're used for study.
Right.
They had, it's funny is that we stood next to a xeriscaped garden, a dry garden, a rock garden.
Mm-hmm.
And they were saying that was the only reason that's there is because they got money from the Marshall Plan after World War II. And they built this as a tribute to the United States. And it's all like, rockscape, xeriscape
Yeah.
plants. But the greenhouses were
They were
just
amazing.
incredible.
They were.
Victoria lilies,
Mm-hmm.
and we were before we taped. We were like our camera was fogging up because it
Yeah.
was just
So
so
hot,
so
yeah,
hot
so
and
you-
moist in
yeah.
there. But it was amazing how much they had. The corpse lily, which we go crazy about, they had probably a couple dozen of them in various stages of growth,
Yeah.
and you know that
That's
eventually
cool.
they're going to have some blooms.
Yeah.
Stinky
Yeah, but
blooms.
they were massive.
Yeah.
I mean, they were
They were
huge.
cool, yeah. Well, the tour guide that I had, he was so interesting too. I mean, he was a professor, actually a retired professor, and he was saying too that they do a lot of saving of plants there. They have like a seed bank and also they save plants just, especially for their champion plants. Like these plants are they're several hundred years old, trees.
Right.
And of course they get hit by lightning or they just have disease. So they take cuttings so that they still have these trees. They have like the scion of the trees that somebody gave
Right.
them or they brought back from some kind of a
Yeah,
trip or
and my
something.
take on the gardens too is like sometimes you go to botanic gardens and they're very uniform and very
Mm-hmm.
manicured and neat. This one was more kind of a working botanic garden where you
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
could actually they let the plants grow and do what they
Mm-hmm.
need to do and see their actual form, and it's maybe some may think it's a little messy looking, but when you look beyond that, it's you're actually seeing what they do, and it's a research. It's
Yeah,
a
right,
university
right.
that's studying these. So.
And
Yeah.
Judy, you pointed out the markings on some of the tags that some of them were endangered.
Yeah, so then that's really kind of a conservation thing too, that they're really kind of making sure that they do have cuttings or they save seeds or whatever. So that was really interesting. There was a lot of those in the greenhouses from areas that are just, they won't grow anymore in the wild, so that they're keeping them in greenhouses. So yeah, it was really eye-opening that way to see what extent they're using. It's just not a pretty place. It's really, it does have a purpose.
But as we've talked in past podcasts, about climate changes and in zones changing and plants surviving in one area or not, it does kind of shed light on the importance of having these botanic gardens where you get these seed banks and studying that we're preserving these species of plants before they go extinct somewhere, and trial them as to, okay, maybe they can migrate to another area.
Sure.
And it was just fascinating. I'm reading here 4,000 square meters of greenhouse space alone, and this is a university in the middle of the city. So it didn't take us long to get there. We spent a lot of time there. It's funny because when you do something like this, you block out time. And there are certain gardens you go to and you're saying, okay, I really wish we would have had more time at that garden or this garden. But you have to go on to the next thing on the itinerary because you promised people on the tour that we're going to go see the woman with the pearl earring or something. Wonderful piece of art. So that was the frustrating part, because I could have spent more time in those greenhouses. That was just fascinating. So
we have to go back.
Yes, exactly. So as Ryan mentioned, we did talk with Joost, and he's a volunteer there, a docent who leads people around. Had some very fascinating insights into the gardens and what a botanical garden means. And so let's take a listen to that interview.
I'm out here at the University of Ghent. We're at the Botanic Garden, and I'm with Joost.
Hello.
And Joost, what do you do here at the Botanic Garden?
Well, my main thing I do is guiding. I guide people through the garden on a voluntary basis.
You know, it's a beautiful botanic garden. You know, we're standing inside of the greenhouse,
Yes.
and this is just one of many areas of the botanic garden. So inside of this greenhouse, what are some of the different areas that we've looked at today?
We've looked outside, of course. We have started our tour outside, and the emphasis of a botanical garden is that it is a garden that is based on scientific insights. You know, plants are related to each other, and we try to reflect that relationship. So we all know that plants we can categorize in families and so on. So we try to make a clear insight in which families and so on.
Yeah, because there's a lot of importance that comes from botanic gardens, as far as you talked about the science that becomes behind it. But we also talked a little bit earlier about other reasons that botanic gardens are important.
Yes, of course. Botanic gardens are also a haven for plants that are endangered in may I say, the real world, in our environment. And that is due to the human race that has made it sometimes very difficult for plants to live in. So we try to protect these plants and eventually to reintroduce them in their natural habitat.
Because there's lots of different plants that have grown here at the Botanic Gardens. About how many different plants?
We are talking about 10,000 different species of plants.
Wow.
But that's only a small part of it, because, as I told, there are about 300,000 plants that are blooming there.
Yeah, but the importance is, is you're studying all of these plants, and a lot of these plants aren't just naturally grow here, do they? Because we're inside of this greenhouse, and so you take some of these plants; they're from all over the parts of the world.
Yes, that's true.
Yes, and so when you're studying these and looking at the plants, what kind of things are you looking for?
That's a good question, because most of the times we are looking for something. But the mere thing that they are so amazing plants, because to approach the plant academically, but we try to understand the plant. We try to understand the plant with our intellect. For what is it good? But maybe there is another. I don't know. I can't explain very, very clearly. But I just can tell that they are living things
Right.
like us.
Right.
Yeah.
And we study the interactions between the plants and how they live together.
Yes, yes,
And
that's
how they mature and
That's very
how they flower or how they go
Yeah.
to seed and
That's-
what
yeah.
is involved in that.
Well, yes, but you have to, and as a gardener, you must know that plants needs attention, you have to take care for them.
Right.
You know.
And we talked earlier about plant science has changed
Yes.
over the years, and we've talked about just some of just the basic what a plant was.
Yeah.
And now we're learning more.
More, yes.
And and plants are maybe the name might has changed. So how is some of the changes you've seen in science?
Yeah. Well, I think this is the main thing I've seen in scientifically. They are trying to study the intellect of plants. That plants are intelligent. You
Right.
know.
Because a lot of times we used to just look at a plant and think it's pretty.
Yes.
It has a nice flower.
Yeah.
But the more we study plants,
the more we discover
learn.
that there are more things engaged in.
Right, and I think that's what's important about botanic gardens like these and universities that are doing the studies is we're always
Yeah,
learning more.
But on the other hand, not all scientists are in it. I
Right.
mean, in it. Sometimes when you say a plant is intelligent, they laugh at you.
Right.
Because they are so, so, well, I don't know if I may use the word, conditioned to see only intellectually to the plant,
Right.
to give it a name and to categorize it and to,
Right, and we're doing lots of study. We
Yeah.
study these, and it's always evolving. How long has these gardens been here at the university?
That's about 200 years because at the university, it's the University of Flanders. When was it? In 1805? 1830? About 200
About 200 years that
Yeah.
these gardens have been here.
Yeah.
Obviously you have not been here that long.
Well, if you look at my beard,
And you said you are a volunteer, so
Yeah,
you come in and give tours like you are
Yes.
to us and help educate
yeah.
the people about what a botanic
Yeah.
garden is and its importance.
But what for me is very important is the interaction between the people that are here.
Yeah.
They love the same. Well, they are into plants, so
Right.
you have some kind of item where you can
Right.
talk about.
Because there's been a lot of changes with plants in botany. So what do you think what is the next change? Where do you
That's
see
it.
plants
I'm
going?
not a fortune teller.
Yeah.
What is the next change? Well, maybe the intelligence of plants, that we go deeper into that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
because recently there have been amazing discoveries about, for instance, the mushrooms in the forest, that they make a kind of internet under the ground, that they, and many people have heard about that
Right.
also. So I think that our investigation should go to in this direction.
Right, and so not only study above, but below.
Yeah, not above. Yeah, of course.
Right. And there's a lot of talk lately of the climate and how our climate is changing, and the seas are rising and the earth is getting warmer. Have you seen changes throughout the gardens over the last
Of course.
200 years? What kind of changes have you seen here
Well,
just at these gardens?
other plants take over. Other plants take over, and the plants that are the most specialized, they will disappear because they have not,
Right, that they have to adapt
Yes,
and change.
they have, and they can.
Right.
Plants can.
And so is there concern amongst that plants that are maybe disappearing? I think you collect seed and have a seed bank that you're storing, and that's I'm assuming important for in research that you're collecting these species before they disappear,
Of course.
and you do a lot of study with that also.
Yeah. Well, not me personally, but at the university they do that.
So,
Yeah.
so the gardens are very amazing, and it's
Thank you.
been a pleasure to walk through
Thank
and
you.
walk with you to see the different areas of the gardens
Yeah.
and see the greenhouses. So, Joost, it's been a pleasure with spending time with you and learning more about the great gardens out here at the University of Ghent.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was a fascinating interview, and he was very hesitant, I think, because of his concern with the language.
Right.
But he did a great job.
Yeah, he did.
And we learned a lot. It was amazing because when you get something like that, where you're on a tour and you have two docents that are split the group in half so that, they can, it's a smaller group, they can handle
Right.
questions. When you come back and compare notes like we just did, you learn something different from each one.
Oh,
Yes,
sure, yeah.
absolutely.
They get different takes on it or their expertise.
Yeah. So we're going to take a quick break. We need to kind of get up to speed on what we did next. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the last few days of our tour. Stay right there.
At Capital Subaru, we value your time, whether you're here for service or working with our amazing sales team. Everything is right here for your convenience. We offer a great selection of Subarus, an industry-leading service center that keeps you moving, and so much more. Like our living green wall, just one of the many features throughout our dealership. Looking for the perfect pet gift? Check out Happy Paws Pet Shop right here in our lobby. Or plan your next adventure in our fireside seating and find your happy place. It's always your time at Capital Subaru, your way on the Parkway.
And welcome back to the Garden Time Podcast. Today we're talking about our tour we just completed to Holland and Belgium. And right now we are in Belgium, and we are on our way, we're staying in Ghent, we're on our way to Bruges, which was a day just to kind of enjoy that beautiful city. But on the way we stopped and we saw Chris. And he has a private garden, but he's also a garden designer. One of the most impressive gardens I think I've ever seen. And so what impressed you about Chris's garden?
For me, it was, it was a lot of plants that I haven't seen in years.
Yeah.
And it was very well laid out as far as heights and color. Here it is, it's, in the September when we're there. And the amount of color and blooms and textures that were in his garden were unbelievable.
It was so good. And he's a professional landscape designer, garden designer, and to use this as a showpiece to bring his customers, his clients, I think you can really see it. Because you can only draw so much or whatever, but to see it live, and
Right.
I can bring this to your house, or I can bring this little part to your house. But we just loved it, and it's like me and Ryan, we were just like writing down names on things.
It's
and-
funny because everybody in the
I loved it so much I bought his book. I can't read it because it's in Dutch, but it's like the pictures are really nice.
beautiful, beautiful book. But it was amazing because people were hanging around you guys because you guys know plants so
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And Laura was
And
with
Laura,
us
too,
from
from
Portland
Portland
Nursery,
Nursery,
was
yeah.
part of the tour. She actually paid to be there, but she was like this extra
She was
plant
great.
person.
Oh my God.
phenomenal.
And you guys would get in these huge discussions about what the plants were, what the varieties were.
was fun.
But there was, it was around every corner.
Yeah.
There was something new.
Yeah.
He had the pond right in the very front off the driveway. Around the corner of the house, we're seeing some of his other formal gardens. The sun garden with all the perennials and grasses and stuff
That was beautiful.
was fantastic.
Yeah.
And everywhere there was another little thing to see.
Right.
This
His whiskey house.
His whiskey house. I was going to get to that. That was very impressive, people. And it was just a little shed in the back of his property. And when he's gardening, he can go back there and he has
Yeah.
a
need to
selection
take a
of
break.
scotches and whiskeys. So that was kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
But the woman that looked like she had just crawled out of the pond, and it was a pile of soil
Oh, right.
that
yeah,
looked
yeah.
like a woman face down. It was strange.
That was kind of creepy.
But kind of unique.
Yeah.
Right.
Because
This is art.
if you
there
didn't
you go.
see it, you missed it.
Right,
So,
right.
And then greenhouse space, and he was an expert in, I can't remember the name of the plants now.
Persicaria.
Persicaria.
Oh, they're everywhere.
Right.
My gosh,
And-
have
and-
never seen that many in one
I know.
place.
I was blown away, and I'm
Yeah.
like going, why don't we have that many? And obviously,
Yeah.
that's an overload to try to stock stores.
Right.
Can you imagine bringing
I know, so
50 different
many.
Persicaria
Yeah.
into the
But
garden
yeah,
center?
to see them though, that was really cool.
And what stood out to me too was like, the fencing. So there is no fence. They use hedgerows.
Right.
And so they use, I think it's a hornbeam or beech,
Mm-hmm.
I think is what they're using, planted very densely, and it's extremely manicured.
Oh my gosh, yeah. How many times a year does he do it? It was, I don't know how
It has to be multiple. He does it all himself.
because it was all just beautiful.
And it's not just a wall of it. There's, you have archways and pillars and three-dimensional,
It was layers.
Yeah,
layers,
it was.
right?
Yeah.
You have up and then a break with a stem and then a second layer
Right.
and then multi-depth. It was
It
pretty,
was incredible,
pretty fascinating.
yeah. And I think to drive home the point about fall gardens, I mean, there was just so much color and texture. I think that we all kind of lack that. I don't know if we're just tired or we just don't plan that long for it, but
Right.
the color and just the interest that was in his garden
And,
was
and he would
really
have
nice.
some areas that would just, a lot of one thing. Like you would have some ornamental grasses, right in fall is such a great time for the grasses to see all their plumes and their textures. But you do some mass plantings and layered looks, which was very effective to give you that kind of what it actually looks like.
Right.
Versus, sometimes we get, at least in my yard, I have so much a lot of things where you kind of lose that perspective of having the big mass plantings, but it was stunning.
Yeah, we need acres.
Yeah, maybe that's the
It
problem.
was
with that.
fascinating because people were not in a hurry to get through Chris's garden.
Yeah.
I mean,
No.
it was,
No.
and people were going back. He had his
Backward,
garage
yeah,
door
yeah.
open, and people were like cutting back through the garage
Right.
to
Yeah.
get back to areas that we had already seen.
Right.
So I found that one to be fascinating, and then of course we went to Bruges and had a wonderful time in Bruges. Beautiful medieval city, and it's amazing. When you talk about cities that are that old, the selection of plant material, there were certain things that we noticed when we were in Harlem, which is the suburb that we stayed in when we first got there. You and Therese and I went walking, and plants growing out of cracks in, they have a small little square, maybe a foot square, and wisteria that's growing
Up
5
those
stories.
buildings,
Right.
Yeah, attached to buildings and
I was just fascinated because we talk about, we have no place to put a plant. We're running out of place. No, you're not. No, you're not. Go to Europe and you see in some of these gardens how much they can cram into such a small space.
Right,
which is-
and I noticed those that walk around. Is every city we went to. Granted, we have the eye for plants, and we're always looking at that. And with these cities that are thousands of years old, right? I mean, some of these places are dating back to the 16th century.
right.
Right, and it's they don't have. There's not big gardens, but it's containers, it's pots, it's windowsill gardens, and everybody does it. You look
that
around
was
and every window in the side of a building, everybody's got plants sitting in the window. There's a collection of pots and containers
Every
next
doorstep.
to every doorstep,
Every doorstep,
and
yeah.
every little alleyway.
Yeah.
Everywhere you go, there's plants.
Yeah.
Right.
It was really sweet to see because it's a big, I mean, they're not big cities, but they're nice sized cities. And
Right.
there's not a lot of green spaces that we saw or
Right.
that we found, but there is little pockets of it everywhere.
Right.
So that
and
was
and
really
it's
nice to
interesting
see.
where you find the plants to purchase.
Yeah.
Walking around
Right.
around town, I would run across like these little tiny shops that look like have a little display with
Out
their little
front.
rolling carts
Yeah.
of plants out front. And you walk in, and it might be a kitchen shop
Right.
filled with amazing kitchen gadgets and towels and linens
Mm-hmm.
and house plants and indoor plants, outdoor plants,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just kind of where you go to get what you need. You don't need a lot, but you can pick up whatever little seasonal plants that are there. You can pick up cut flowers and potted plants. So it's just kind of a really cool, kind of a fun market vibe.
Yeah, it is. That's true.
And when we were in Harlem and we went to the historic gardens, we were walking back to the bus. So we had a couple blocks, and there was a flower shop. And Ryan and I, we were kind of bringing up the back anyway to make sure that everybody was, got on the bus. And so we kind of split off and ran over just to look at the selection of flowers. And those flower shops were not an anomaly. They were on
Every couple blocks.
every
yeah.
couple blocks,
Yeah,
just
it's
about.
every block,
Right.
yeah.
And it made me think about how we have, you go here to a Safeway or to a Costco and you buy cut flowers and you get them occasionally. And just the proliferation of flower shops makes you think they use flowers a lot.
They do.
Yeah,
People
more than
bring them
us,
into their
yeah.
homes on a weekly basis.
You see people walking around town all the time carrying a bouquet of flowers, or they're on their bike and they have a bouquet in the basket
It was true,
on their way
very
home.
true.
It's kind of, on their way home, they'll stop by the little market, they'll pick up the food that they need for their meals for that evening, and they'll pick up a flower or potted plant, and that's just part of their routine is always having something fresh, be it food or in flower.
Yeah, I saw so many people, they had either a cyclamen or a heather in their hand as they're going home
Yes.
from work
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was just like, it was so great to see. And I think that we always key in on that, but it's like, it looked the norm.
Well,
Right.
and people get basil plants or basil, however they pronounce it over there, and they get the live plant, and then you bring it home and you use it and you toss it away.
Yeah.
You compost it and recycle it or whatever, and you use fresh. You don't necessarily always go and get some dried. You
Right.
use fresh whenever possible, and they sell the herbs in the little street markets and everything else. So the next day
different
we
lifestyle.
the next day we ended up going to Kinderdijk, which was the
windmills.
UNESCO's heritage site. That was kind of cool to see that,
was.
and saw how they used those windmills to create arable land. But then we stopped by, and we're in Leiden, and we stopped by Hortus Botanicus, another one of the oldest horticultural gardens, botanical gardens in Europe. And we were there, and it seemed very small, but it wasn't. I mean, they packed a lot in.
There was
Very
a lot.
much.
Yeah, and so we once again had to split up, and we did two different groups. What were your thoughts of
Well, it was
Hortus
so
Botanicus?
interesting because it really started as a medicinal garden because Leiden was the medical school. And so back then they used mostly herbal plants for herbs, for different kind of medical treatments. So that's how it started, but then they kept going. And I asked our docent, our guide, I said, well, do they have like a horticulture study here? And he goes, no, not really. We're still a medical school. And so that was kind of interesting. But this garden was just incredible.
And it's like everywhere you go, you'd go around the next corner and it'd open up and, okay, here's a big Japanese garden. Right. Walk around. And then you go a little bit farther and here's a huge, beautiful fern garden.
Yeah,
In the
rose
shade.
garden,
And it's
yeah.
just in a rose garden. And it was like, the more you kind of kept exploring, it would just keep opening up to all of these different amazing gardens.
Yeah, it was really,
It
that was
was
fascinating.
it was very interesting too because there were parts that you can obviously see they were there for education
Yes.
purposes. So they had like the life cycle of a seed and that kind of stuff and displays so that people with kids could come in. You mentioned the Japanese garden and that area. A lot of that medicinal plants, and our docent, our guide, was telling us what the various purposes were of plants. And we found that fascinating. His name was Robert, and weird accent, kind of British, but he was a local boy. But you had a chance to talk with him a little bit about that. So let's take a break now, and we can catch a little bit of that interview that Judy did with Robert.
All right. I'm in Leiden in the Netherlands, and I'm with Robert Fulmer. And Robert, we are just in this amazing historic garden that is from so long ago, but what is the proper Dutch name of this place?
Well, the proper Dutch name is the proper Latin name, I would say, Hortus Botanicus Leiden, the plant garden of Leiden.
And so it's a botanical garden in the middle of the city, right by the University Leiden. And so, but it is so old, it's from when? Way back when?
It's from 1594 is when we opened our doors to the public, and it was founded in 1590, so not so long after the founding of the university and not very long after Leiden was liberated from the Spanish.
Wow. And so really it was not started as an ornamental kind of stroll-through garden. Why was it begun?
It was a university garden from the very start. So the university wanted a garden with medicinal plants for their students to research, and that's why it was founded. That's why they gathered up the money. Although from the very start, the first director was a man named Carolus Clusius, who was also himself, he wasn't so much interested in medicinal plants, he more liked rare and ornamental plants. So it was also, to some extent, an ornamental garden from the start.
Well, I think that's, gardeners, we love to have rare things and we collect things, and that's kind of how we all go as gardeners. You want something that's really unique to kind of have to show off.
Precisely. I think that's of all ages.
Definitely. But now it's really kind of morphed into more than just a medicinal garden or to study for medicinal plants.
Yes, I think over the course of the centuries, that's how long we've been around, it's changed. We can see parts of our history in the 18th and the 19th century that there were definitely parts of the garden that were there for strolling, for looking very good, which they did. And even these days we have a recreational function. It's also a lovely place to walk around. But we've also built all of these different parts of the garden to show off different plants, different uses. We have our Chinese herb garden. We now have a pond that shows off native species of plants and native species of animals, because ecology has become this very important subject that we're trying to do more with. We have our rose garden, which shows not just lovely roses, but old breeds of roses that you don't see very often anymore. And we have, of course, our glass house over there. Our glass house has this giant collection of plants from tropical regions. We have a tremendous collection of Southeast Asian orchids, for instance, and also carnivorous plants, so pitcher plants from Southeast Asia, many of which are incredibly rare and have to be researched and have to be multiplied and spread to gardens all over the world to make sure that there is a backup supply.
Wow.
Like, should they go extinct in the wild, we can reintroduce them. And we're doing research still. After 400 years, we're still doing research on plants. It doesn't all happen in a lab. You have to start at a garden, and sometimes you never leave. So we do ecologic research into pollination, and now we're also working on historical research. We've got more than 400 years of history, and some of it's gone quite mysterious to us. It's gone a bit hairy, so it all has to be looked up and reclassified, and there's lots to do.
But that makes it interesting, and it really, it gives people so much more to study and to discover.
Precisely.
Yeah, we always need more information. And what I thought was really interesting too is that you have so many historical trees. I mean, we saw a tree from the late 1600s, and then you take cuttings from it to save just in case you have to propagate it again. So I mean, it's really saving our world of plants too.
That's one of the things that's different from other museums, because we are a living museum. All of these plants, they're alive, and we have to keep them alive. You can't put them in a box and expect them to keep going. No, if you treat them wrong, they will die and they will be gone forever. And some of these plants are irreplaceable. We've got lots of bamboo over here. Well, if some of that dies, that's okay. But that Japanese elm tree behind us is from 1830, and it was born and bred in Japan, and it was brought over here on a wooden sail ship. It took 9 months. It survived, and it's been growing here ever since. And if it were to die, that'd be that. We can plant a new Japanese elm tree, but it would be a new Japanese elm tree. So these pieces are irreplaceable, and they are living creatures, so you have to give them exactly what they want, and that's what we've been doing for these 400 years. And it's it's no small thing.
No, but to go back to what your specialty is, kind of you study things that are no longer around.
Speaking of plants dying.
Right, so talk about what your specialty is.
Well, I come from paleobotany, meaning paleo, very, very old, older than archaeo. So fossilized plants, that's what I study. And I've always been interested in ecologic interactions, and that's something you don't see very often in fossils, which tells you something about the world that these plants lived in. If you find a fossilized bee and you find a fossilized flower, that's all you've got. You don't know if one interacted with the other. So when you do find something like that, when you do find some evidence of something happening, one organism doing something to another organism, that's tremendously valuable, because to us in this garden, it's very commonplace to see all of these insects interacting and plants interacting with one another. Some plants preferring the shade, some preferring the sun, some preferring to stand by the water, some liking it dry. With fossils, that's all incredibly difficult to discover. And so it's all fun and good to study T-Rexes, but plants, that's where it's at. That's where you can find these interactions. That's where you can find these patterns. That's where you can actually learn something about how the world looked. And I switched to living plants a couple of years ago, mostly anyway. It's a lot easier, but it does impress upon you, as someone who spends a lot of time looking at stones, that there is a tremendous complexity that's very, very difficult to find in those stones.
Sure. Well, it kind of links the past and the present, and so it's like it kind of makes all sense in the roundabout way. So we've had such a lovely time here at the garden. So thank you so much for all of your information, all of your knowledge.
Of course, you're very welcome.
That was a very good interview, and he was very, very interesting guy.
He was.
And he has a plant kind of background because he's a forensic
botanist.
Wow. Yeah.
So he said, well, what did the dinosaurs eat?
Yeah.
It's like, he goes, there's all that kind of study, but he said he really likes living plants.
Yeah. But you learn about stuff from pollen and that kind of
Right.
stuff. And
Yeah, but he
so
was
you
interesting.
can find that. So from then we ended up heading back, and we started in Haarlem, which was a suburb. We go down to Belgium. Now we're coming back and we're in Amsterdam. And not so much, a lot of garden stuff in that first day back. But the next day we went to the Rijksmuseum, which has its own beautiful little garden out there. But one of the best museums in Europe.
Amazing.
Rembrandt.
It's huge. And
Yeah.
It is big.
It's unbelievable just how much art is in there.
And how much you've seen your whole life, and now you can
Right,
see
right.
them. It was great.
And it's just like room after room.
Yeah.
And it's not just paintings.
No, right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like miniature like battleships and guns down in the basement
Right.
and statues, and it's just you could spend a lot of
Furniture,
time.
yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, we needed another day there.
I know, and I learned a lot about the use of plants in paintings,
Yeah, that's
and
cool.
because you look at a painting of a arrangement of flowers,
Right.
and you notice quickly that not all the flowers are blooming in the garden at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, but in the paintings they are, and they would do sketches and then incorporate all those paintings. Little things like bugs,
Mm-hmm.
mice that show our insignificance.
Right.
The thing is that as Bo, our tour guide, was telling us, you learned about the fragile time of a flower,
Mm-hmm.
and the idea is to enjoy life. Stop and smell the roses, essentially.
Yeah.
Enjoy life while you can, because we're all here just a short period of time.
So, and I've been to a lot of museums, in my life, but it's nice to have a tour guide.
It is.
At
You
some of
learn
these,
so
you
much
learn.
more.
You can look at a painting, and there's so much more to it than you would ever pick out on your own. That it was nice to hear
Very
some
much.
of these
Yeah.
they talk about. I was like, oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like the reflection in the still lifes, there was a picture, and the reflection in the silver of the picture was the window behind looking out to the landscape. And it's like, it's a small little
Yeah.
detail, but I
Yeah.
never would have seen it.
Yeah, and
That's cool.
it makes me look at landscape art a little different
Right.
now. So
But the landscape, speaking of landscape,
Yes.
at the Rijksmuseum,
It was
it's
gorgeous.
known for its its art, but they have a wonderful gardens
Very much.
outside that's surrounding the building, and it's just you go out there and it's just groups of people around there. It was very impressive
Yeah,
gardens.
and it's right in the center. I mean,
Right
it's like
in
any
town, yeah.
museum. It's in the center of the town, and it was lovely. But
It was-
another place, if you go, you need more hours.
yeah, and that's free too. So you could wander that.
garden,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, the
Right,
garden's
gardens.
free. And Teresa and I, we'd gone to the Van Gogh Museum, and it's all part of one big museum complex. They have a modern art museum there, but they also have a park. We watched school kids, and that was the other thing too, is that the amount of public using these parks. School kids, that was their PE area. So they came with this rolling garbage can full of stuff, and they were playing on the grass right next to the Rijksmuseum.
Oh, cool.
So it was kind of cool. We went from there. We saw a cheese farm, which a lot of people are going, okay, yeah, farm, wonderful. But this was fascinating for a couple reasons. So the cheese making.
Yes, that was so fascinating because it's like, Holland is known for cheese making, and it's like, and we got to taste
Gouda.
a lot. Gouda cheese,
Gouda.
it's the one in the
Yeah.
red container, red wax, and it was like, and there's so many different flavors, and different kind of animals depending on the farm, if it's goat or sheep
Right.
or cow's milk, but
And this was a fun farm. It was not real big, but it's another one that's been in the family for forever. and you can see the passion of these people that are making this. It's a small farm. The cows are right there. They're going over to the barn right there. The setup for everything, and it's just all hands on. It's not this big industrial stainless steel pots. They're making their cheese like they did 200 years ago.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And it's amazing.
And then right around the corner, wooden shoes.
Yeah.
So his little side hustle, which is like, okay, it's in the same building.
Yes.
Go through a little door, and he hand makes all of the wooden clogs and ships them all over the world. And he starts out, with a little block of wood, a little piece of poplar, and he shows you how he splits the wood and then runs it through his little lathe. That's, his machinery is over 100 years old because they work better than anything new that he can get.
Of course, yeah.
And then he hollows it out, and then they hang them up there to dry, and then they take them upstairs where they're hand painted, and tells you the whole history about how the different markings in the painting, what they all mean. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
And then we went from there to a garden and a bistro and had lunch in a beautiful little garden, but we didn't spend much time because it was raining. So, but we completed the day and completed our tour at the Floriade. And this was what we were telling people, this is a once every 10 years a gardening event. And Amsterdam, I understand they don't make money on it. They tend to lose money, but because they love plants so much, they really want to host this every 10 years. And there's different themes. And this year, the theme was sustainability. And, so the gardens around the Floriade all address that pretty much.
Yeah, and and what's cool too is this will stay. I mean, the buildings are going to stay, the gardens are going to stay, and it'll be like a public space. Right. And so that's really a gift to that city that it is in. And every 10 years they get a new park.
Yeah, and it's the World Fair of horticulture.
Yeah.
And so countries from around the world come and set up their areas and showcase their plants and their living, and what sustainability. That was the theme this year, was what that means to them and what it's like from that country. So it's very interesting to. It's very well laid out. We were there for a long time, and you could have stayed a lot longer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And really, I love that one statue of the man with the child, and it was all bees. It was all like little or butterflies,
little
and
bees,
it was,
yeah.
And that was just, you didn't see it until you got really close to it, and then you could, really appreciate that they're the homage to bees and how much they really mean to us, and then to take the overhead tram and kind of see, I just
the
think
landscaping
that's
is phenomenal,
cool.
and the use of color and the use of flowers, and it's one thing that stood out to me and throughout the entire trip was the importance of bees and pollinators. Everywhere we went,
That's true, there was.
every garden we would see on the side of a building in the middle of the city, in concrete everywhere in these bee houses. The plantings are bees. Plantings along the canals where nobody walks, it's left to be pollinators. And throughout, Floriade was the same way. All of the landscapings were focused on bees and pollinators.
Yeah, it was when we got there. There was an island called Utopia Island, and that was more about growing naturally. And for a lot of people, that wouldn't seem like it was a very clean garden area, but it taught about how to raise fruits and vegetables, how to incorporate into the natural landscape.
Right.
When you got into the rest of it, it was more of the sculptured gardens and some really kind of unique places. They had the one place that was layered fabric in the shape of an eyeball.
Oh, with all the dyes.
Yeah, and then they
that
had
was cool.
when you stepped inside, there were bottles filled with different colored dyes and some weird art pieces.
Yeah.
And the light coming through was casting this rainbow effect. There were all kinds of other gardens. They had a huge greenhouse space.
Oh,
That was filled with different growers and producers, had different booths. Phenomenal. We were there during potato week, and there were 12, they had potato growers, had 12 different kinds of potatoes, unlabeled, and you were going through and tasting potatoes to see if,
different flavors.
and then you voted, and they were trying to determine which potato to grow and produce more of. So,
and like I said, different growers and breeders would showcase,
Yeah.
all of their new breeding technique. Okay, here's all the bromeliads or whatever, and you would just have this sea and this beautiful display of all the different colors, or the calanchoes or whatever it was.
Right.
It was just orchids everywhere.
Yeah, and it's such a showcase too. I mean, for the horticulture industry to shine.
Right.
There's not a lot of places like that that are to the public. I mean, we go to conventions
Right.
all the time that are for industry, but to have it for the public is really something special.
Yeah, yeah, and it was a wonderful end to our tour. Unfortunately, for those of you that are watching, it's now done.
Yeah.
It's done for the season. So they are wrapping up as we are recording this last couple days. So it'll be done, and then you'll have to wait another 10 years.
2032?
Yeah,
That's right.
And who knows what the theme will be then. But
Yeah.
as Judy mentioned, this is all going to stay on and become its own little community and urban space. So really a great tour. And we're just talking about, we have those same sites here.
We do. I mean, it's lovely to go to different countries, different
is.
states,
Right.
and going to see things, but really, in your area, in the Northwest, we're very blessed, all the public gardens we have.
Right, and with Garden Time, we've been fortunate enough to be able to go out and experience the Japanese gardens and the Chinese
Yes.
gardens and the Oregon garden and all these various different public places that are open. And people travel here to come
do,
to come
yes.
visit these things, just like we go travel and see the world. But I think the important thing is go out and experience these things.
Definitely.
I mean, it's easy to get stuck at home in your own little rut.
Yeah.
And, you don't have to go travel halfway around the world to go see things, which is phenomenal and
Yes,
lovely.
of course, yeah.
But there is so much more that right here in your own backyard, wherever you may be, that you can go experience and just get outside and see a garden and see what else somebody else is
Yeah,
doing and
I
get
think-
inspiration.
I think that's the big takeaway from any kind of travel or tourism or being gardeners or, it just check out your neighborhood or check out your
Right.
local area. Yeah.
Because you were talking about, Hoyt Arboretum now has the tree walk.
Right.
The
I'm trying to think of
the gardens at Lusher Farms, the
Yes.
Rogerson.
Yes, Rogerson
Rogerson
Clematis
Clematis
Garden. Yes.
I mean,
all
these
of
are
those.
all beautiful gardens.
Yes.
And we have, you're talking about the PPA, which is the Perennial Plant Association,
Mm-hmm.
Far West Show. These are groups, nationwide, sometimes worldwide groups, that come here for conventions
Mm-hmm.
and tour these same gardens, like we did in Amsterdam
Right.
and Holland and Belgium. They do it, they're paying money to come here to see our gardens. So I think it would be great if people were to do
And
that.
even if you're not here in the, since we're here in the Northwest,
Right.
I've been traveling a lot this year and go
Right.
down to Arkansas and down in the South. Wherever I go, if I have free time, I go find a garden.
Oh,
I go find
fun,
a
sure.
park, and it's amazing when you start looking what you will find in your own backyard.
It's so true.
So that'll do it for us. People have been asking about another Garden Time tour. We do not make any commitments. We had a great time, but we really want to just kind of enjoy this right now as it stands. So who knows? Just go to gardentime.tv. Not only will we have kind of the rundown of what we talked about today, I'll have links to all those gardens that we visited, and including some of the museums as well. And like I said, you can always go to our Facebook page, on the Garden Time Facebook page. Scroll down, starting from the beginning of September through the middle of September. Every day we posted pictures of the tour. So we hope you enjoyed it. We hope to see you guys visiting a garden here locally, or maybe somewhere around the world in the future.
Let us know.
Yeah, but thanks again to Capital Subaru in Salem for sponsoring us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.
Start your new Subaru story at Capital Subaru. We are like nothing else in Oregon. From the moment you step through these doors, you see it, you feel it. We do things differently here. Our people, our culture, our customer experience. Tell us what you're looking for and we'll upgrade the way you shop for Subarus. When you're just browsing, need great service, or starting your next adventure, we're always here for you. It's your story at Capital Subaru, your way on the Parkway.